I'd like to call the Gurnee Village Board regular meeting of December 17th, 2018 to order. Roll call, please, Andy.
Ross.
Here.
Garner.
Here.
Balmas.
Present.
Hood.
Here.
Thorstensen.
Here.
Jacobs. Here. 6 present.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening. The holidays, it's our last meeting of 2019, so we will get to it with public comment first. If you'd like to address the board, you can state your name and sign in the back so we have the correct spelling and the address.
Good evening. My name is Yolanda Pomiatlo, and I live right here by the Kensington Court community, and my address is on the sheet. Exactly 46 days ago, Lake County residents found out about the alarming high levels of a Class 1 carcinogenic ethylene oxide being emitted into our air by Vantage Specialty Chemicals and Medline. As the Village Board is already aware, ethylene oxide is a cancer and reproductive hazard. There is absolutely no dispute in the greater scientific community that ethylene oxide is harmful. At the recent Willowbrook Town Hall Forum, the EPA publicly confirmed that no amount of ethylene oxide is safe to breathe in. On December 7th, the EPA shared results of 3 days of air quality monitoring in Willowbrook, Illinois. The tests were conducted on November 13th, 16th, and 19th. According to the EPA, monitors detected ethylene oxide in the air at 2 sites closest to the Sterigenics facility. Despite scrubber technology, which is now in place, ETO is still being emitted and detected in the air at concerning unhealthy levels. School buses in Willowbrook, Illinois are now rerouting to avoid exposure. Please allow me to repeat. School buses are now rerouting to avoid exposure. Congressman Dan Lipinski released a statement after seeing the recent results from the EPA. Quote, and I quote his statement, "Despite Sterigenics' claim that it isn't a public health threat, and despite their new pollution control equipment, initial EPA testing has shown significant ETO emissions around the facility," Lipinski said. "While more testing will be occurring, this preliminary data confirms my belief that this plant is a threat to public health, and unless data is provided to the contrary, I maintain that this plant should be shut down." The mayor of Willowbrook, along with other local leaders, has also called for a complete shutdown of the facility. Our movement to ban ETO emissions in Lake County and in Willowbrook is supported and acknowledged by many of our state and federal representatives, both Republicans and Democrats, as this truly is a bipartisan issue. This past weekend, Lake County residents proudly joined Willowbrook in their public protest in front of Sterigenics headquarters in Oak Brook, Illinois. Thanks to the grassroots efforts and the continual persistence by outspoken residents who are demanding immediate action, our movement to ban ETO emissions near schools and residential areas is now receiving national news coverage. Awareness of this critical issue impacting our community is spreading, and we don't intend to stop until we see results. And by results, I mean a ban on ETO emissions by our homes and schools. We demand to know what is being done by our Lake County local leadership. The EPA website that was set up for Lake County has not been updated with information since its inception a month ago. Our community is hungry for detailed information on an action plan moving forward. We demand similar testing that is being done in Willowbrook be conducted in our homes and our schools. Until we have concrete data and independent testing, not testing sponsored by Vantage or Medline, we will not be content. This problem can't continue to drag any longer. We know ETO is harmful. We know it is being emitted in our community, and we need it to stop. I ask of the Village Board to promptly provide a detailed plan with dates and deliverables. Vague statements such as "we're meeting with officials" are no longer acceptable. We want air monitoring. We want a detailed plan. And most importantly, a timeline for deliverables, such as the mayor's notes for all recent meetings. The citizens of Lake County deserve answers, a detailed plan, and a swift action plan to ban ETO emissions in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Roz Deegan. I live in Gurnee in Country Trails. This is only my 4th meeting that I've attended trying to understand what actions have been taken by you regarding this threat of ETO exposure in our community. I expect that my elected officials would be treating this with utmost urgency and transparency that is needed to ensure the safety of our community and our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ryan Horth. I live at 4487 Sheffield Court. It's been a busy couple weeks for me. This past week's District 56 communique to parents included an update on ethylene oxide emissions, and that encouraged parents to visit a linked article for more information. The website it linked to is a fake news website that's run by the Illinois Policy Institute. It's called the Illinois News Network. This is a front for wealthy business interests, and it's not real news. Parents who read this article will be misled, as large portions of the article are factually false. I have in here to say that I'm currently working with the school district to get this sorted out, and this is an example of how this misleading information is all around us. But just before I came, I got a response from the superintendent of schools, and her response was about as bad as possible. She insisted that the information was accurate, even though I pointed out at least 3 pieces of false information in the article. The article was also slanted to bash federal Democratic officials for pursuing this, while saying nothing about the state Republican officials who are leading the charge in the state. So it produces a partisan picture that's not really there. The EPA testing results from the Sterigenics plant in Willowbrook were released recently within the last couple weeks. These results again illustrate what we're up against. Sterigenics has maintained that EPA's previous estimates were too high. The testing results confirm the estimates were an underestimate. The biggest problem is the way the EPA appears to have worked with Sterigenics to undermine their own testing. The day before Thanksgiving, the EPA made a big announcement that was covered widely by the media. They announced that their air testing was unable to distinguish between ethylene oxide and trans-2-butane, a chemical common in vehicle exhaust. They said this might inflate the testing results. I believed it was irresponsible to make this announcement without first knowing whether the results actually had been affected. The result was predictable. The media often failed to understand the distinction, instead asserting the results were indeed wrong when they did not know if they were. Sterigenics, of course, blatantly misled, stating that testing was wrong, and the fake news sites did the same, such as the Illinois News Network. The public was propagandized based on preliminary information that was uncertain, and the source of the propaganda was the EPA that is supposed to be protecting us. At a meeting with DuPage County residents, the EPA professed innocence and regret at the way this was portrayed in the media. But I find it hard to believe the EPA is this incompetent. I find it more likely this was a deliberate attempt to assist the Sterigenics disinformation campaign. Roughly a week later, the EPA released their final testing results, including an analysis of trans-2-butane. They found their initial concern was unwarranted, and in fact, no trans-2-butane was detected in the air. This was reported much less widely than the original claim. The result is the public received bad information, and most people have probably not seen the corrected information. The article linked by District 56 included these false claims based on the original EPA statement, with no correction after the EPA's later statement. Last weekend, I attended a protest in Oak Brook in front of Sterigenics' corporate office. I learned some important information while there. First, I learned how supportive and active the elected officials in DuPage County have been. Their state senator and Representative Curran and Durkin both appeared at the protest and spoke to the crowd, encouraging them to continue protesting, and they promised to fight until the situation is resolved. 2 members of the DuPage County Board also spoke and expressed their support. It is notable that both Curran and Durkin are Republicans, and they emphasize that clean air is not a partisan issue. It is the right of everyone. Other facts I learned were about the explosive danger of ethylene oxide. In focusing on cancer to this point, I have not emphasized this danger. The Willowbrook Fire Department gave a presentation to their community. Sterigenics stores roughly 10,000 pounds of ethylene oxide on site. The fire department told the community that if this were to ignite, the resulting explosion could destroy everything within a half-mile radius. I found this alarming because Spalding Elementary School is roughly 1/2 mile from Vantage at Gurnee. In fact, ethylene oxide is so explosive, it is used in so-called bunker buster bombs. These are bombs used to blow out mountains and caves. Called thermobaric bombs, they are the most powerful conventional weapons in the world. Russia has built a thermobaric bomb using ethylene oxide that has been nicknamed the father of all bombs. Its blast force approaches the force of a small nuclear explosion, and like a nuclear weapon, it produces a mushroom cloud. Video of a test of this weapon can be seen on the internet. I also recently watched a Chemical Safety Board video produced as a recreation and explanation of the ethylene oxide explosion at a Sterigenics facility in Ontario, California. Everyone should watch this video for a lesson in how easily companies skip even basic safety measures. Aside from the gross negligence that led to the explosion, 4 workers were seriously injured because Sterigenics installed non-safety glass in the control room overlooking the sterilization chamber. The explosion shattered this glass, sending debris showering into the room. An ironic and tragic moment in the video shows the massive damage inside the control room. On a wall is a large sign that says, "Safety is for life." The company that put that sign there failed to take even basic measures to protect the safety of its workers. This is one reason why I take no comfort in statements that the employees of these companies live in our community and are just as concerned as everyone else about safety, because these promises are often empty promises. The safety of the employees is often not taken seriously by their employer. Another reason is because some other information I learned this past week. I spent a lot of time going door to door gathering signatures to run for trustee. I talked to many people about ethylene oxide emissions, and virtually all were opposed, but had not yet become involved. Several expressed surprise that nothing had been done yet. What could possibly be more important than this, they said. I spoke to people who work at the Medline facility. They had noticed how many of their coworkers had cancer. I spoke to one whose rare cancer was highly likely to have been caused by ethylene oxide. And this was only canvassing a small portion of the community. I only met a bit over 100 people and only had in-depth conversation with a few dozen. Who knows what I would find canvassing thousands? This is the other reason why I do not trust assertions that employees are members of the community, just like us, because those employees have cancer. The companies follow OSHA limits, and those limits are inadequate. I do not care if you follow OSHA or EPA limits. Those limits lead to cancer. And no one is really verifying they follow those limits anyway, not OSHA and not the EPA. This is just some of the information from the last couple weeks. In the coming weeks, I'll continue to speak until we have a satisfactory resolution to this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public before I move on to the regular agenda?
Good evening. My name is Brittany Albrecht Sloan, and I live at 388 Tanglewood Drive in the Country Trail subdivision. My concerns over ETO remain, and we don't know enough about the impact on our community. In the coming year, I would like to see leadership from the village board to advance this issue, both with neighborhood level testing and also support for action at the state level. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll have another opportunity for public.
Now that we are connected with the Willowbrook community, we are able to exchange information. We're able to understand this issue a little bit better. I asked them what it costs to do independent testing that is non-EPA testing, that is third-party independent to come in to the village to test our water, to test our air, especially in areas close to the Vantage facility. And they said it's about $80,000. It's less than $80,000. They've done testing in both villages. They did Willowbrook, and it's the village that funded this testing, and they did testing in Burr Ridge. And both of those testing, third-party independent companies that did the testing were funded by the village, and it's in addition, obviously EPA is also doing testing, but this is in additional third-party independent testing. I think this is something that we absolutely need, because if we don't have data to understand the impact and the level of this toxic gas around our community, how are we supposed to know we're safe or not safe? I think until we have that, we're going to continue to demand action. So,
all right, thank you. All right, I'm going to close the floor to public comment, but you will have an opportunity at the end of the meeting to address the board again. Before I call for the resolution for the motion on the consent agenda, we're removing item number 6 and item number 7, and we'll handle those as a separate vote outside the consent agenda. So do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented minus items 6 and 7? Motion from trustee Balmas, second by trustee Jacobs. Roll call, please, Andy.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstenson.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Aye.
6 aye.
All right, motion carries. Patrick, please read the consent agenda into the record.
Item number 1, approval of the minutes from the December 3rd, 2018 Village Board meeting. Item number 2, approval of ordinance 2018-84, amending Chapter 32, Section 32-36, entitled Planning and Zoning Fee of the Gurnee Municipal Code. Item number 3, approval of ordinance 2018-85, accepting the final plat of 1001 Tri-State Parkway. Item number 4, approval of ordinance 2018-86, authorizing the execution of a professional services agreement with IMEG for engineering services for the 2019 street maintenance program. Item number 5, approval of resolution 2018-08, establishing certain property of the Village of Gurnee to be surplus. Item number 8, approval of payroll for period ending December 7th, 2018 in the amount of $1,133,170.59. Item number 9, approval of bills for period ending December 17, 2018 in the amount of $6,631,472.06.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read into the record?
Second.
Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee Jacobs. Roll call, please, Andy.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner. Aye. Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstenson.
Yes.
Jacobs. Aye. 6 aye.
Motion carries. We'll go back to item number 6, approval of reduction in letter of credit for Bellwater Place public improvements to $21,500. Do I have a motion to approve?
Yes.
Motion by trustee Jacobs,
Second.
second by trustee Garner. Roll call, please.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner. Aye. What did he say?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry. Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Abstain.
Thorstenson.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Aye.
So that's 5 aye and 1 abstain.
All right, motion carries. Item number 7, approval of reduction in letter of credit for Bellwater Place tree planting to $97,600. Motion to approve?
Yes.
Motion by trustee Thorstenson, second by trustee Jacobs. Roll call, please.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner. Aye. Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Abstain.
Thorstenson.
Yes.
Jacobs. 5 aye, 1
All right.
abstain.
Motion carries. We'll move on to petitions and communications. The first is a proclamation for Lake County, Illinois Crime Stoppers Month, January 2019. Crime Stoppers of Lake County is a nonprofit organization primarily funded by private donations, and Crime Stoppers of Lake County has paid cash rewards to persons providing information leading to over 6,665 arrests and convictions and the recovery of over $29 million worth of contraband and recovered stolen property since April 26, 1983. And Crime Stoppers of Lake County benefits the citizens and the business communities in and around the village of Gurnee by partnering with them and with surrounding law enforcement agencies. And the village of Gurnee and the Gurnee Police Department fully support the efforts of Crime Stoppers of Lake County. Now therefore I, Christina Kavarik, Mayor of the Village of Gurnee, Lake County, Illinois, do hereby encourage support for Crime Stoppers of Lake County and proclaim January 2019 as Lake County Crime Stoppers Month in the Village of Gurnee. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by trustee Garner, second by trustee Ross. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We have our first proclamation for 2019. All right, next, it is an honor tonight to be recognizing some very important public safety officers. Chief Woodside is going to present the Gurnee Police Department's 4 Pillar Awards. And I will hand over the microphone to Chief Woodside. Last time. And our Deputy Chief and Head of Detectives, Jesse
Yes.
Gonzalez.
Thank you very much, Mayor. With me is Deputy Chief Brian Smith and Deputy Chief Jesse Gonzalez to help present the 4 Pillar Awards. This is one of the most rewarding reports and opportunities I get to present in front of this board, so I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to do this. Just by way of explanation, the 4 Pillar Awards started about 7 years ago when we reworked our mission statement for the police department, identifying who we are and what we stand for, and 4 pillars emerged that became part of the mission statement. Crime prevention, response to crime, community impact, and team building. And those 4 pillars became part of the annual evaluations for all of our officers, part of the feedback that we give to officers on a routine basis. So it didn't just become part of a mission statement that got hung on a wall or put into a book. It became something that was part of our identity and part of an ongoing feedback. So this is the 5th year that we have presented these awards. And one of the other major awards that we present every year is our Officer of the Year, Police Officer of the Year, and our Civilian Employee of the Year. And those represent a 1-year body of work, so that we look at that like a sprint. And the pillar awards are more like a marathon. None of the officers that we'll be recognizing here tonight have less than 10 years of service, and they have been going above and beyond and being exceptional in one particular area of emphasis for a long part of their career. So we will start tonight by working backwards with the least senior of that group and ending with the most senior. So that gives you an idea of how we're going to go. So you can figure that out back there. The Community Impact Award is presented to a member of the Gurnee Police Department who exemplifies our value to create an excellent partnership with the community. Sergeant Jason Kalinowski has been with the police department for 10 years. He's currently, come on down, Jason. He is currently the president of our FOP Social Lodge. And when you think FOP, Fraternal Order of Police, you probably think Collective Bargaining Unit, which is absolutely what it is. But the Social Lodge is much more inclusive than that. I've been invited to be a member of the FOP Social Lodge since its inception. We have members that are from our communications department and from our records department. Supervisors, all walks of the department are part of the Social Lodge. And they get involved in many, many things in the community, many fundraisers. And Jason has been front and center in all of those, even before he was the official head of the Social Lodge. The Police and Fire Charity Golf Outing each fall, the Outrun the Cops and Walk for the Kids Charity 5K and 10K each spring. And every year we do a Shop with the Cop program, and I want to talk about that because that just happened this weekend. 40 kids and 30 members of our police department from all divisions met at Great Wolf Lodge, and the police officers took these 40 kids shopping to buy gifts for Christmas. You'll notice the facial hair on the officers, and it'll get increasingly impressive as officers come up here. But we do a no-shave November to raise funds, and then a double-down December. So what you're seeing is the excess of 2 months of beard growth. But $5,700 was raised for the Shop with the Cops. So just an impressive effort. Sergeant Kalinowski is the face of that, and many of the things that we do have a profound impact on our community. It's hard to believe that you've had the impact that you've had on this community and this department in just 10 years, but it says it here, so it must be true. So congratulations, Jason. The second award is the Crime Response Award, and this award goes to a police officer who is extremely prepared to deliver police service. It's presented to a member of the Gurnee Police Department who exemplifies our value to provide a rapid and professional response to confront crime when it occurs. Officer Tom Woodruff has been a police officer with us for 12 years. He is a field training officer. He's a rapid deployment instructor, which means he instructs our officers on how to respond in crisis situations, in active shooter situations. And he also serves our department on the Northern Illinois Police Alarm Service, the NIPUS EST, which is what you would think of as a SWAT team. So as far as tactical preparedness and readiness to respond, there is none better, more prepared than Tom. He is a great example of a police officer here in the village of Gurnee, and a great it's my great honor to present you with this award. Congratulations, Tom. Oh, that's right. The Crime Prevention Award is presented to a member of the Gurnee Police Department who exemplifies our value to provide a proactive and educational approach to reducing crime. Officer Chad Tompolis has been with the Gurnee Police Department for 19 years. Come on down, Chad. He has a very impressive beard. Officer Tompolis has been actively involved in a number of neighborhood watch groups and is an instructor in our Citizens Police Academy. Feedback from groups that he speaks in front of often comment on his sincere and knowledgeable professional approach. He will always tell you how it is, and he'll tell it straight. He's also a Marine, so he does not have an indoor voice, so when he speaks, you'll know it. So, our crime prevention officer, who was the first recipient of this award 5 years ago, was enthusiastic in nominating Chad for this award, and he noted that almost 50% of Officer Tompolis's activity is proactive crime prevention responses. Those are building checks, business checks, hotel, motel, liquor establishment visits, foot patrol, following up on extra watch requests, all self-directed, proactive crime prevention efforts. And his commitment to crime prevention resulted in his assignment out to the Gurnee Mills substation this year, where he's going to turn that superpower onto the retail establishments out there. So it is my pleasure, Chad, to give you this award. Thanks. And last but certainly not least, the Team Building Award is presented to a member of the Gurnee Police Department who exemplifies our value to create an excellent work environment so we can recruit and develop an exceptional team. And very often this award focuses on somebody who gives back significantly in the area of training or development. And that is the case with Officer Marty DePurdy, who's been a police officer here with us for 22 years. This is the best beard of them all. Here he comes. Marty's been a police officer with us for 22 years. He's a firearms instructor, a less lethal shotgun instructor, another one of our rapid deployment instructors. He's an armorer for our rifles, pistols, and shotguns. Everything firearms, Marty has his hands on. And we have a firearms program that is really, I believe, unsurpassed in many area police departments. You know, not only do our police officers qualify once a year, but we practice on the range every year, or every month rather. 10 months out of the year in our indoor range, 2 months out of the year in the outdoor range with rifles, shotguns, and it's not just firearms training. With Marty's creativity and innovation in these programs, it really becomes decision-making training and use of force training. So it's, we have a firearms program that's second to none because of Marty's contribution and involvement in that. Marty is the first of our officers to receive 2 pillars. He was the crime prevention recipient, I believe, in the second year that we presented these awards. So Marty is a great contributor to this police department, a great member of the team. He's given back in many, many sacrificial ways, but most importantly, our firearms program is unsurpassed because of your contribution. It's my pleasure to give you this award, Marty.
On behalf of myself, the village board, and the residents, we cannot thank you enough for your dedication and commitment to keeping this community safe. I honestly am awestruck every single day and so proud of everything that this department does for this community. It is just mind-boggling. Most of the community has no idea, but myself and the board, we get intimate with what goes on every day and all the things you do that no one ever finds out about. I don't know how you do it, but thank you, and you have a promise from myself and this board. We will continue to support the police department, invest in you, invest in training, invest in equipment, and do what we need to do to keep you safe too. So thank you. public safety in general, so. All right. All right, you guys have a safe holiday. All right, next up under reports, we have a presentation by Arista. I'm sorry. For a discussion about Old Grand Avenue, the Village Center, as it relates to the comprehensive plan update. So I'll turn it over to you, David.
Yeah, David will give a quick kickoff here, and then we'll turn it over to Arista.
Good evening, everyone. As we are into the comprehensive land use plan update, our consultant Camiros and represented by Arista Strungis, who's the project manager for the project, we ran into once again the concept of the Old Grand Corridor, again, the slow conversion from residential into commercial properties, the potential for that, how it's been reflected in previous comp plans, and what our plan is moving forward. So we just wanted a point of clarification tonight from the village board, and just kind of an update on what our approach as we're moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Arista.
Okay. Well, hello. It's nice to see everybody, and you're not seeing double. Trustee Ross and I did wear the same dress and totally coordinated that. We have good taste. So we're just here tonight because we've started work on the comprehensive plan. We're not very far in this process. We've been kind of looking at the previous plans, looking at the map, so we haven't come to any major decisions. But one of the points of clarification, as David said, that we needed to figure out is what to do with this area of the Old Grand area, or what's called the Village Center within the zoning ordinance. If you remember me from the zoning project, that's how I'm familiar with it. And so we've been looking back at the older plans and kind of the efforts that were made there, the idea of these residential conversions into more office uses, as well as kind of what the zoning provisions say, which is along the same thing. And then looking back at the 1997 comprehensive plan, because we're doing an update, so we want to go back to the source. So really looking at that, I kind of looked at the idea of it converting into a kind of low-intensity mixed-use district. It's signified as this Village Center area. It had this other larger area where we're kind of standing right here in 1997 that was part of this, but this is already developed as really a kind of Village Center for Gurnee with the post office and the library and Village Hall here. So, went back out in the car, kind of looked around and kind of came up with some issues that we saw going on in this Village Center area. It is that mix of uses, low intensity office as well as residential, a little bit more prominent mix of uses on the west side of the railroad bridge. The east side is more residential, stable residential. The plan encourages, the 97 plan as well as the zoning ordinance, encourage that kind of conversion of the residential into more office type uses, but this has come up with some stumbling blocks against the building code, so that conversion isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. Currently, you've also got the kind of weird configuration where lots front on Old Grand and then the backs of houses are on Grand, and they're large through lots. Lots are of different sizes. So the idea was, as we looked at this, is this area really primed to become something that is really more of a mixed-use center that would live up to kind of the Village Center name, or is this just kind of another lower scale intensity use? And for us, moving forward in the comprehensive plan, we needed the clarification to figure out what we needed to do next. If you saw the memo, which I'm going to have to say, I promise you this is probably the shortest one you'll get in this whole project. So, after this, presentations get PowerPoints and longer. But really, our first approach was really to leave it as is, to allow for a natural conversion of houses if that were to happen. There's a lot of stability there in the residential. It may perhaps need to change names from it being Village Center to something like a residential professional district area. And really looking at it kind of continuing as it is, making sure that we plan for, as it changes in the future, but not a very aggressive sub-area plan. We called this, the first approach, the kind of as-is approach, really just refining that. We wouldn't approach this as a sub-area plan within the comprehensive plan. We would really just address the situation that's there, acknowledging that it was brought out as a sub-area plan in the 97 comprehensive plan. Approach 2 has the scarier name of major redevelopment, and this would be looking at it to see if we wanted to start creating some planning policies that really would transform the area into something more intensive mixed-use type development. A couple of issues with this that we wanted to point out, you do have that kind of smaller lot pattern parking may be more difficult, circulation would be more difficult. You have some very nice homes in this area, and that kind of pressure would, then fall on those homeowners as well. And as well, if you start to bring in more businesses, start to create more kind of activity happening there, more cars are going to come there, and there may be impacts to the surrounding neighborhoods. And finally, just really looking at those issues of compatibility, looking at the homes that are there, this would be a very kind of very big switch from what's currently in place, and something like this would require a more intensive sub-area plan. So really what we needed before we proceeded first is really to take the board's temperature on how we should proceed. Of these two approaches, one's really kind of keeping things going as they are, and the other's a little bit more extreme. We needed feedback on which one the board feels strongly for that we can then further research and look into. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Like I said, it's the shortest presentation you'll get in this project, so.
So they're just looking for some general direction of what we think about the village center, and then obviously this will go through the whole process. Proposals, plan commission moves up to us, and so we're a long way from having to finalize anything, and there's not a lot of detail, but just in general, since 1997, are we happy with the village center and how we're kind of moving forward on it? Do we want to do something, create another retail corridor, more intense retail corridor? Trustee Hood?
It is my observation, just over the years, it seems like as the first proposal of just allowing it to develop instead of becoming more of a, we use our job as the village is not, I won't speak poorly of Rosemont, but that's not how our approach has been in the past. So I like just seeing how it develops and following up behind to see what the interest is in the general public. And it seems like the first selection follows that idea. Doing a major redevelopment doesn't really seem to make sense at this point, and isn't really supported what's happened in the last 10, 15, 20 years either. So.
All right. Comments from Trustee Garner? You're like almost ready to talk.
Yeah, I concur with Tom Hood on this one. It's just, I don't know that doing something major would make a whole lot of sense because of the area in general and how it's developed on its own over the years. And I think it might make a mess if we, after the investment, if it still didn't work,
Right.
I just don't think it's a prime area for major redevelopment in a nutshell.
Trustee Ross?
I agree that it'd be hard because there are a lot of people who've lived there for a long time, and to have them find out that then they aren't able to stay or whatever, that would be pretty difficult. And also with the trend now away from shopping in brick and mortar stores and more people ordering online, we could build something and we have plenty of other places to shop. So I think leaving it as is would be my choice.
Okay. Trustee Balmas?
Well, being that probably half of it is in the flood plan, floodway, it's kind of hard to say, oh, redevelopment, because if I was a store owner and, having a flood issue every once in a while doesn't sound that inviting. I mean, the bank built itself so it's up high, and their drive-through does prevent them from occasionally even utilizing it. So at this point, I'm as is kind of person too, and I still like, though, that it's our, what do we call that?
Village center. Village center.
The village center, because it really kind of is with our schools and that's pretty much where I'm at.
Trustee Thorstensen?
Sure. I think over the years we've had some surveys of the population, at least at the East Grand level, that Ellen and I have been working with. And when you talk to the neighbors east, on East Grand and certainly east of 41. They like their neighborhood as is. They aren't asking for services that we can't provide to them. So I think certainly the as-is approach is appealing to me. Additionally, while I don't know, and while it would have, I'm sure, some price tag with it, but when I see major redevelopment, I'm thinking price tag, and knowing that redeveloping, our idea of design and redeveloping an area may not then provide the money to be used for the services to the entire community, such as police and fire and public works.
Trustee Jacobs?
Over the years, I've always thought that we've missed a true downtown, retail area. I think, we've always missed like having like a Libertyville or a Highland Park area, but, the retail conditions have changed over the years. And, every once in a while I go to downtown Libertyville now, and it's not a retail area anymore. It's all restaurant. It's Restaurant Row. So I think based upon what I've seen as of late, conditions have changed. And I think that my opinion has changed. So I tend to concur with everybody else at this point. I think the natural flow and leaving it as is probably the way to go.
Yeah, and to achieve what Libertyville did, they used multiple TIF districts, and that's not anything that this board's ever been interested in because it hurts the school districts. So, and I like the character of the village center. I like, it's quaint, it's unique, it's eclectic. I think it's worked out real well. We've focused and invested on the East Grand Gateway, which is starting to pay off with, a lot of things coming forward there. And we obviously have Hunt Club Grand Corridor. I don't think we want to invest that in another, we'll keep the village center the way it is, the way the plan is, which, I'm sure it needs to be tweaked and updated, but nothing radical.
Yeah. And just to say, if you couldn't tell by how I presented this, we as planners, we're trying to be impartial, but we're all leaning towards what we call the as-is option. Just looking at it and understanding it and kind of the dynamics here in the village. Just to say, as-is will not be the name that goes into the plan. We will give it a good, we're just trying to keep this very simple for the meeting because it does has a quaint character. So what we would do is rather than kind of replan it out, just create kind of policies within the plan that talk about what people like, how to maintain it, and kind of acknowledge its role within the village. But, it would be that as-is option with a much better name and a little bit of observations on it, but rather than remapping it out, we wouldn't be doing that. So we really appreciate everybody's comments. This gives us a lot of good direction.
Well, it's better to get it now than go through this whole process and then we throw you a curveball.
Right. This is a lot cheaper than planning the whole thing out and everybody saying, what did you do and why? So
you might consider a boat dock,
All right. Well, thank you. Got what you need?
Put it where my house is.
All right. All right.
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to seeing more updates on the comprehensive land plan.
Yeah, we're getting started soon.
All right. All right. Now, one of the most important things that we do all year is our planning for the future. We have a presentation by our finance director, Brian Gosnell, for forecasting for fiscal years 2020 through 2024 and our multi-year capital plan, which is extraordinarily important to every single resident. And this become a roadmap. So Brian or Pat, you want to introduce it?
In the past, we've done these as two separate presentations. This year, we combined the presentations, gone a little bit more high level on the financial forecast now that everyone has seen it a couple times and knows the information that's in there. The plans themselves still contain the same level of detail, so you've got that micro level, but Brian's going to approach this tonight as far as the forecast from the more macro level and then run through the capital proposal as well. So this is kind of the start of the budget process. Obviously, we're just presenting this tonight. It's a 3-month process plus, so this is just the initial approach to the capital. If there's any concerns, comments, obviously reach out to Brian or myself and we can tweak along the way. First budget hearing isn't until March, so we've got some time. So turn it over to Brian.
All right, thank you, Pat.
Included in the material is both documents. We're really looking for the forecast. We're looking through fiscal year 2024, along with the capital plan goes out that far as well, but really with the focus on in the capital plan on what's coming up in the next budget year. Purpose of both for the multi-year forecast, what we're trying to do is confirm our long-term sustainability, identify threats to services or the capital plan early on. The forecast is not a projection of potential financial outcomes. It's not an absolute predictor, and it is not a replacement for the budget process. On the capital plan side, we're identifying our long-term strategy here. Provides a scope of what we're responsible for, which is quite a bit if you look through the document, and a preview of what our budgeted capital priorities are in the next fiscal year. Looking at our financial planning and reporting process, this is the first two steps. This is the long-term planning steps, followed by the annual budget, and then quarterly financial status updates, and then the CAFR in October. Looking at the forecast, the structure remained the same. We did 5 years of history plus the current budget, and then an estimate for the current year, plus 5 years projection. We looked at revenues, expenses, capital funding, and fund balance. We looked specifically in depth at major general fund revenues. We forecast those in 3 different scenarios: baseline, what we call a baseline, expansion, and contraction. We'll get into that a little more in a little bit. Funds included in the forecast: the general fund, water and sewer operating fund, which includes the water and sewer capital fund, motor fuel tax fund, and capital improvement fund. Looking at some key decision points from prior years that are included in the forecast. Debt service, we talked about utilizing some debt service rolling off for capital, $675,000 annually. It's included in the forecast. The water rate plan that was approved 2 years ago, I believe, is included, and that goes through fiscal year 2021. Our last rate adjustment under that plan occurs May 1st, 2020, so it won't be long before we're looking at that again. On the water and sewer capital funding side, we talked about drawing down that fund balance. If you remember, when we looked at the rate plan, there's a point in time when we see a little bit of relief from the JAWA rate. That also allows us to get not to the target capital funding as outlined by Baxter Woodman a few years ago, but pretty close. So that as soon as we see that, we talked about drawing down the fund balance up until that point. Also transferring some money from the general fund to the water and sewer capital. And then, of course, the Knowles Road Tower funded by the low-interest IEPA loan. And how we structured that was $1.5 million up front on a fund balance, and then added $200,000 annually to that debt service payment. Looking at threats to long-term sustainability, as with any service organization, personnel costs outpace revenue growth. And we look at baseline revenue growth for the major general fund revenues. State budget situation, we saw that impact last year with the income tax and the home rule sales tax. Call them adjustments. The changing sales tax landscape, we had the South Dakota Wayfair decision. How does that change what we're seeing in terms of revenue? Also, how does that change the brick and mortar landscape? We're fortunate that, we've seen vacancies, but they've filled very quickly. So I think we're fortunate in that respect. Federal legislation, economic policy, interest rates, and how does that impact borrowing and consumer spending? On the opportunities side, 911 consolidation. As you know, we've been heavily involved in that over the last couple of years. East Grand Corridor, revitalizing that corridor, doing some work there. A large portion of our workforce is going to turn over in the next 5 years. Maybe some opportunities there, and at least managing and getting through that. Again, South Dakota Wayfair, what does that mean in terms of revenue impact? And then the big three. Six Flags introduced Holiday in the Park this year. Great Wolf is open. What's the impact of that and the surrounding businesses? And then updates to Gurnee Mills. We have interior renovations and talk of the radio station still out there going in. So lots of opportunities, particularly with the big three impacts there. New to the forecast this year, we included in there the additional 6 firefighters that we had talked about through the firefighter grant that the fire department received, adjustments to the hotel and amusement tax, the Six Flags rebate, Great Wolf rebate, and then on the water and sewer side, The timing of the Knowles Tower shifted out a little bit. We had anticipated getting more done this year than we actually did, so it just shifted out a year. So you'll see some variances there. And then the IEPA loan payback with the $1.5 million up front and the additional $200,000 annually on the debt service. Looking at the three models for revenues, this is general fund major revenues here, about 75% of all general fund revenue. Baseline growth, what we're looking at to capture here is just long-term historic growth trend. So what's the average long-term? In the expansion model, what we try to capture here as far as growth is immediately after a recession, growth ramps up. Let's capture that continuing for the next 5 years. And then on the contraction model, we want to capture the impact of a recession in the immediate year, year and a half, and then expansion after that. Similar, same as last year, no changes here. These are the revenues that we look at in detail. With just one change within the document this year, amusement tax. Because of the rebate agreement, we forecast that at our base. If you remember, the rebate is set up to where the village gets a base and then rebates over that. We didn't do the same thing with the hotel tax because there's just a bigger mix of taxpayers there. Those are the revenues that we look at through those three models. Total dollar, combined all those revenues, baseline in blue there. You can see it matches kind of the linear trend, historic growth, almost right on. Expansion is the green chart there. That obviously shows revenue growth over the baseline, and then contraction in yellow, impacts of a recession in the immediate 2 years, followed by expansion type growth. On the expenditure side, what we look at is salaries, health insurance, property liability, workers' comp, pensions, and debt service. One of the things we like to do this time of year is look at debt service a little more in depth here. This chart shows general fund and water and sewer, so there's a little more here than just general fund. But you can see the Park District bonds come off next year, or at least our share of them right here. And then following that, the Series 2011, and then we add the IEPA loan right there, comes on. And that 595 includes the additional 200,000 annual debt service payment. Looking at how all that kind of shakes out in fund balance, here's fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. So this is what we look at when we think about our fund balance policy using all three models. It is important to look at this chart with keeping in mind that this doesn't take into account our conservative budget practices. So this assumes everything is going to happen exactly as it happens in the forecast. Historically, we've had $1 million surpluses, and I got a couple more charts here that'll show that a little better. But overall, as you can see, if a recession happened, that's the yellow line there, we would not fall below our fund balance policy. If we did absolutely nothing in response to a recession, we wouldn't fall below our fund balance policy until 2024, which is a very good spot to be in. I know the chart probably doesn't show that so much, but it is a very good spot to be in. This is the same chart, just looking at dollars. And really what I want to show here is we took a look at the very first forecast we put together and to show the impact of conservative budgeting and some of the adjustments we do make to operating throughout the year. And that red line shows you what our forecast for fund balance was 3 years ago. So, and you can see even the baseline is about $2 million above that. And that didn't take into account Key Lime Cove closing for a year. So as you can see, we are outperforming what the baseline is. And that's due to conservative budgeting, making adjustments throughout the year when we can. So it's definitely a good story there. On the water and sewer side, as I mentioned before, we have the rate plan that goes through the last adjustment being May 1, 2020. We assume a 1.5% annual drop in usage when we forecast revenues. On the expense side, we forecast the same expenditures as the general fund, also include a JAWA expense and the Knowles Road Tower, obviously, on the capital side, and then those capital funding items that we talked about before, drawing down fund balance, utilizing $300,000 transfer from the general fund to try to get to that $2.8 million target. And with all that included, here's a look at the undesignated, unreserved in the water and sewer fund here. You can see the initial drop in the first 2 years here is from that $1.5 million upfront payment for the Knowles Tower, levels off over $3 million. That's still over 25% of expenditures, so the water fund is in a good spot as well. Forecasting the capital fund, this is non-water and sewer capital. Revenues here, we look at the expiring debt service transfer we talked about coming in of $675,000 annually. We have drawdowns of the impact fee fund. We've been doing this over the last few years. Talk about this more at budget time. Transferring about $200,000 from that, and then we use the baseline assumption for home rule sales tax, the half that's dedicated to capital that comes directly into the fund, and then expenses we use from the multi-year capital plan in this fund, and then fund balance here. We had talked last year during budget and during the forecast that the fund balance in this fund comes down to about $500,000, and we like to see it up around $1 million. The forecast says it'll get there out about 3 years out, and we can sustain the capital plan that we have. So it was a positive outcome here in this analysis. The MFT fund, if you recall, last year we took the approach of utilizing MFT funds every other year, kind of cut down on that paperwork that's required by IDOT, use staff a little more efficiently. We had drawn this fund balance down to almost about $100,000, somewhere in there. We want to get that back up to around $300,000 and utilize it every year, and the forecast shows that's possible. So, kind of wrapping up the forecast piece here. Just recommendations, kind of what we see, diversify the revenue base. We did that partially with our adjustments to hotel and amusement tax, which was great. Diversify the fund setup. One of the things that I'm going to talk a little bit more about when we get into the budget is taking the health insurance expenditures out of the general fund and segregating it into a separate fund. Health insurance is one of the more volatile expenditures in the general fund, so if we can take that volatility out of the general fund, give it its own kind of reserve that it can balance off of annually, I think it'll help the general fund out. Review fund balance targets, which we do all the time. Manage that workforce turnover I talked about, segregating one-time revenues, things like the tower that we've been talking about, the cell tower, keeping those things in capital and not using them for operating. And then full cost recovery. Good example, actually, of full cost recovery is something on the agenda tonight with the ambulance services, looking at things like that. So. And that's it for the forecast. I'm happy to take any questions or jump into capital.
That's just the forecast. Questions? Trustee Ross?
Back when you were kind of pointing toward a recession, is that because of things that you've been reading that makes you feel that that's where we're headed? Because when we were talking about how long the recession lasted, it was, the chart that goes up and down like this, it seemed to go down a lot longer, and the hope was that it would go up as long.
Yeah, so one of the contraction model just shows the impacts historically of what a recession has been. So we took kind of the 2001 recession and the 2008. We discounted the 08 one a little bit because that was historically bad. So we kind of blended those two and said, what was the impact to major revenues? And then take that and say, okay, if it happened, this is what the impact would be of major revenues, and that's a drop in the first 2 years. And again, this is with us doing nothing. So it would just be a drop in the first 2 years, and then it would bounce back to the expansion period type revenue growth. So that's what we're showing there. There's no expectation of it. It's just one of the models that we put out there to be ready for in case it happens, to know what that impact would be. If you recall, last year we looked at the fiscal contingency plan, which would basically lay out a set of steps in case that happened, that we would have kind of ready to go to consider in that situation. So really just what's the impact going to be and what can we do to mitigate that impact.
Other questions before we get into the capital plan?
Yeah, like I said, if questions come up after you take a look at the plan, obviously just reach out to Brian and I. So it's a lot to take in one quick presentation. So
I promise the second half will be much more interesting.
All right, so we got to pay attention and understand it. So
So going through the capital plan, I'll do my best here. We have the full contingent of staff to answer any questions that may be a little more in depth here. Funding strategy stays the same, pay as you go. We don't like to do debt very often. Keeps us low debt per capita. Keeps funds not tied up for debt service. On the general capital side, we got the funding sources are primarily home rule sales tax, motor fuel tax, that expiring debt service we talked about, general fund surpluses, which historically we've been able to transfer to general capital, impact fees and capital grants. On the water and sewer side, obviously rates here, fund reserves, and the low interest IEPA loan are the three main funding sources in the plan. Looking at the plan for the current budget and estimate on the first two columns there, and then FY 2020 is proposed. That's kind of a sneak preview of what we're looking at for the budget, and then out to 24. The pie chart there is fiscal year 2020. As you can see, the water and sewer capital is the largest piece. That's somewhat skewed because of the Knowles Road Tower. And then when we get out a few more years, a couple more years, in the capital improvement fund, we'll see the impact of Fire Station 3. Looking at the capital spending by by system here. This year, proposed for fiscal year 2020, water and sewer is the largest. Again, Knowles Road Tower skews that a little bit, followed by transportation, which is historically the largest, vehicles and equipment, buildings, and then stormwater management. Total plan next year is about $16.4 million. So, and again, skewed up a little bit because of the Knowles Tower. This looks at transportation system spending here. Looking at 2020, 5.2 million, almost 5.3 million. Again, that would be utilizing motor fuel taxes next year. You can see the green on the graph there is when we utilize motor fuel taxes. So it kind of bounces up and down slightly. And included in that, fiscal year 2020, 5.25 million. Resurfacing, striping, marking, crack sealing, engineering consultant. Sidewalks, we have East Grand, also kind of in that East Grand. We included some village share of the quiet zone that potentially may happen. Streetlights, Grand and Hunt Club. Next year, this is kind of fairly new to the capital plan, our intergovernmental participation in the Grand and Hunt Club intersection. We have a couple more years out from that. Grand and Washington, or Hunt Club in Washington. So that was $500,000 each, I want to say, that new to the forecast, or new to the capital plan this year that we didn't anticipate last year. So try to stay flexible. This is the plan for next year. Big ones on this list: Tri-State Parkway, Data Kingsport, Morrison. Following year, Ferndale and Woodlawn. Prior to that will be water work on those two. We'll see that in a little bit. Northeastern Revere, and then Providence. Stormwater management side, about $350,000. This stays fairly steady, about between, say, $350 and $250 throughout the forecast. Next year, a little bit more for some property acquisition on Kilbourne and Emerald. There's 3 properties there that may happen sooner, but likely to be next year. And then some work in Providence Village with the swale and some right-of-way drainage. Water and sewer system here. Notable projects next year. Delaney, Ferndale, and Waveland. Again, getting ahead of the road program that comes the following year. And then the Knowles Tower obviously ramps up next year. And then following that, in fiscal year 2021, some water main work on Old Grant. So some pretty significant water main projects coming up in the next 2 years. You can see in blue there, A, B, and C is next year, or fiscal year 2020, and then D is the following year. Looking at vehicles and equipment, again, went through all the vehicles and equipment with the departments to come up with what it looked like over the next 5 years. Fiscal year 2020 amounts to about 1.9 million. We have kind of our standard IT projects, administration stuff. New to that one is the live video production system, which would be the video for recording the board meetings. And And the police side, we have 4 squads and 2 unmarked cars. When we looked at the unmarked fleet, it was aging fairly quickly. So we're going to try to get that replaced over the next 3 years, doing probably 2 cars every year. And then in-squad cameras is a big one that may happen this year or next year in fiscal year 2020. Fire department has an ambulance slated for next year. And Public Works, and here we have a little bit of a split, 75-25 between general capital and the water fund, 3 pickups and 2 of the big dump trucks. And then annual SCADA system updates that happen every year. On the building side, here we see the 2 spikes being the impact of Station 3. In the capital plan and in the forecast, it is offset, those expenditures are offset to a yet-to-be-determined revenue source, so we didn't draw down fund balance or anything for it. So when that, we have options, obviously, when we look at how to fund that, but that's how it is included in the plan. $1.3 million for next year, some HVAC, carpet, lighting, parking lot patching at Village Hall. Police Department, looking at a second generator, updating HVAC controls, carpet, and then the first $100,000 of 3 consecutive payments, $100,000 payments for the Mills substation. Included that in there this year. Fire Department side, HVAC and interior work, and then the big one, Fire Station 3. Start off with some planning, engineering funds for next year, and then following that, it obviously ramps up pretty significantly. And then in Public Works, some overhead door painting, floor drains, security, and pump station lot resurfacing, or surfacing, I guess, at the Bittersweet pump station. And that's a preview of the capital plan.
All proposed, nothing written in stone. Obviously, this is kind of what we go through at budget time. But for planning purposes, there's a lot of pre-work that needs to be done. So we'll see. And there are some economic signs outside of politics. If you follow the beige book and stuff, that we may want to be more conservative in anticipation of recession. A lot of the signs from 2006, 2007, when we took some pretty drastic, belt tightening, are all in evidence again. So we'll have some lively discussions during the budget hearings and make some tough choices. But the capital, at least, is just for planning purposes, and we'll make final decisions during those hearings. If you had a project that you don't see here, and I know I owe Trustee Thornton a question about one of the roads, this would be a good time to feed it into Pat, so, to help with prioritization if there's something you don't see here. I haven't forgotten you. Just haven't gotten to it yet. Any questions for Brian or Pat? Trustee Thorstensen?
I guess I have one question, Brian. Did you look at it like, of course, Karen's going to have a question?
It's okay.
I just want to make sure that, I guess my eyes just didn't work that well for me tonight, but on the buildings and improvements, the first one was, the one that was just on the FY. Were you saying verbally on that bullet point that that's where our 3rd station would come in?
So next year we had plugged in, I want to say it's about, I don't have it on the notes, 600,000. I'm looking to John, and he's saying yes for what we called kind of land acquisition and planning costs. The actual construction costs follow. We had it plugged in for fiscal year 2021 and 2022, kind of split evenly. Obviously, will change as we get further along, but to kind of just put some mile markers in the plan, that's the approach we took.
And so let me see if I understood that then. So the 1.3 would be the total of land plus building?
The 1.3 is all building and improvements across all village facilities. Yeah.
Thank you. So the 600K then that you just said earlier, that would be for the 3rd fire station?
That's specifically for Fire Station 3.
Place marker, depending on how the negotiations go on land, if we're able to acquire any, how that may look, and depending on what property is acquired, so they can do some planning around what that building may cost, so then we could get a little better with our future estimates on what it would cost to build the fire station.
Yeah, the
because-
placeholders right now, we've got $500,000 in for next year, and then 3.4 the following year, 3.4 the year after that is what's in for placeholders right now.
Because to move forward with the fire station, had to have the equipment, which we have. We had to have the people, which was the SAFER grant, and to fund that is some of the other items under new business. Now we'll start working on how we would pay for and what it would cost to actually build the physical.
And I just wanted to ask one last point, then I think I also heard you say that funding source is called TBD right now?
Correct.
Okay. And does our timeline on the need for the third fire station work out so that we could continue with our budget cycle and prioritization of what's in front of us for budget period?
Well, with the equipment and the SAFER grant for the 6 additional people, we're operating as if we have 3. The third fire station is more logistical to improve the efficiency of our dispatching. Okay?
And
So we're operating sufficiently, and now we have the equipment and the staff to manage the amount of calls, but they tend to not be real efficient because we can't guarantee that we have an even amount of calls on the west and the east. So the third station just helps with the amount of time it takes, where they're located when the dispatch for the second, third, or fourth call come from. So we can operate without the third station.
And so when we do the budget cycle, we'll continue to have this placeholder for the building for the
We'll
fire
have
station.
placeholder to do some preliminary, but when we think we're actually going to move forward, we'll have to figure out how to fund it.
Yeah, and we'll refine it as we go too, as we move forward.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to that point, the 6 firefighters are programmed in. So that's in there, they're ours. The only thing that's TBD on the funding side is the building.
Yes, yeah, and again, congratulations on that SAFER grant, who all was part of it, because that was phenomenal. I'm just wanting to make sure that we give equal weight in the budget cycle to a potential need sooner than later, maybe for the third fire station.
Okay. Got to have some land first.
Forthcoming.
Can't make that like a pop-up. Okay. Well, you have a lot to read in addition to the slides and stuff, so if you do come up with questions over the next few weeks, Brian and Pat are starting to firm up the budget, and department heads have submitted stuff.
They're working on getting their numbers in, so we're going to try to have the budget document together by the middle of February. Get the trustees in one-on-one or two-on-one to meet with Brian and I, then have the first budget hearing, the first meeting in March. But obviously, any time between now and then that there's any questions or concerns or things that you would want included, just get a hold of us.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. These are excellent. You do a better job every time you present. I like the format. We pulled the item number 1. Dirk was not feeling well tonight. So the report on the Bittersweet Golf Course and item number 1 under new business is being pulled too, and we'll do those at the January 7th meeting. So we're done with reports. Any old business?
No, there's no old business.
Okay.
No, you can just hang on.
All right, then I'm going to move on to new business. The first item is item number 2, approval of ordinance 2018-87, amending Chapter 34 of the Gurnee Municipal Code by adding Article 8 to charge mitigation rates for the deployment of emergency and non-emergency services.
Sure. So you had a memo from Jody Luca, our management analyst over at the fire department, on the next 3 items here under new business. John's going to walk us through them here tonight quick, since this is his project, and then we'll take any questions or concerns the board has.
All right, before John starts, just to jog your memory, this was a discussion when we decided to accept the SAFER grant, because we're on the hook to fund 25. So there's a different tranches, but this was one of the ways that I pitched that we could afford the 6 additional personnel.
Yeah, John included some information in his memo on the SAFER grant, because as a reminder, we're 75% is covered the first year and second year, and then the third year that drops down and only 35% is covered, and then after that we're 100% on the hook. So when he put that information together, this was one of the funding sources that he included in that memo.
All right, John, take it away,
Okay,
Chief.
so as you stated, when we accepted the SAFER grant, one of the things that we were out looking for was revenue to help cover this additional cost to the firefighters. During the same process, we were updating our ambulance billing ordinance in our company. We came across something called cost recovery. Our previous ambulance billing company did not offer this service. Our current company does. They have a partner that's actually called Fire Recovery. What the process is they take the fire response to an auto accident, a car fire, any instance that's not a rescue call, and if it's a billable, insurance billable category, they go ahead and bill for the fire response. So, for example, a car accident, if it's a large enough car accident or a serious enough car accident where insurance claims are going to be involved and there's an at-fault driver, the invoice gets passed off to the 3 insurance companies. They figure out who the at-fault person is. That person then, as part of their insurance claim, we would recover our funds for actual costs spent. Part of this was we worked with Fire Recovery and we looked at what the actual cost should be, and one of the items we're going to look at tonight, these are what we're using locally. We surveyed many departments in the area. There's 95 departments in Illinois using Fire Recovery right now. The closest to us, Zion, Waukegan are a couple. There's plenty others. I've spoke to the fire chiefs of Zion to say, what kind of things have you seen? How are things going? He said up to this point, he's not had anyone who's run into any sort of balance billing issue whatsoever. Since this is not like your medical insurance, where there's a copay, you're more dealing with the insurance payment from there. There really has not come up a copay issue yet at this point. What we've done in our ordinance, though, we've made sure that we put in there that no out-of-pocket cost would come from one of our residents. So if the insurance covers it, fine, great, but if one of our residents could see some sort of out-of-pocket, that would be waived immediately according to the ordinance. So we similar to our ambulance billing, we do not want our residents, build more than what their insurance company will cover. We're making sure we're protecting against this. We ran through real quick with the company a scenario, showed how many car accidents we run a year. They came up with a $200,000 a year gross figure. Their fees are 20%. So the net on that be 160. Talking to neighboring fire chiefs once again, this sure is one of the systems that seems to take some time to build up. They're saying year one, expect about 50% of that, and slowly you build up to that dollar amount. They're seeing it. Waukegan's been using it for 3 or 4 years. They said their revenues have definitely got to a point now where they've got close to the expectations the company laid out for them. So this allows us, we currently were billing for car fires through our old company. We'd bill for car fires, anything that the insurance would be involved in. So it's a good program. It'll help offset the cost as we showed in the earlier SAFER memos to you. We're recommending that we work with the company Fire Recovery. They have a very good record, as I stated earlier. The fees are competitive, talking to other people, much higher than ambulance billing. However, there's a lot more work identifying who the insurance companies are. And there's definitely a longer delay and more billing process within this process. Additionally, we switched a short time ago to a new records management system. This Fire Recovery billing company can set up a porthole through there, and so our reports automatically download into the system. Therefore, there's not staff time doing data entry or anything like this. When we do our RMS, our reports, it's automatically going to upload in there. We have a double check system. We've assigned a battalion chief who will go in there daily and check this, and he actually hits bill, no bill. So he does one last review for locations, making sure address is all equal, everything's appropriately set up, and then we actually hit the word bill. But we've looked at it, making sure that our current staff could cover this. We've worked with finance and IS to look at the technology. We feel very comfortable with it, so that's where we're at this point.
Are we sharing any personal identifiable information when we upload to that portal?
We are not. It's been looked through. First question, our IS department, Chris and Ryan both sat in a meeting. They both looked through it. They've also looked to make sure that they're meeting they have all the proper certificates and all the good IS stuff that Chris understands.
Okay. Again, when we discuss this internally, this is coverage that we're all paying for in our insurance. And, so it's not like anybody has to get new insurance or extra insurance. And if we, as we have, chosen not to pursue reimbursement, then that's out of pocket to us as a village. And we have a high number of calls that aren't residents. So it does make sense to recover it. It's a way to get our staffing up to where it needs to be. And it does not put any burden on our residents. So kind of like what we did before with the ambulance billing.
And just to run through the next 3 items, so the first item you'll be considering is an amendment to the municipal code. Attorney Winter worked on this, adds a section that allows for us to charge these user fees, for the board to set the schedule, and then talks about the billing and collection procedures. Next one is the actual contract with Fire Recovery USA. So like John said, they'll do all the billing, all dealing with that, 20% service fee attached to that, and then the final is establishing the rates themselves by resolution. This is similar to how we handled the ambulance billing when the rates were set. They've got an automatic escalate in there annually, which is 1.5%, or the CPI used by the Illinois Department of Revenue, whichever is more. So those are the 3 items.
Questions for Chief or Pat? All right, then I'm going to call for 3 separate motions. Approval of, okay, so motion to approve on amending Chapter 34 by adding Article 8. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by Trustee Thorstensen, second by Trustee Jacobs. Roll call, please.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Jacobs. 6 aye.
All right, item number 3, approval of ordinance 2018-88, authorizing a services agreement with Fire Recovery USA LLC to perform billing services to collect mitigation fees. I'm sorry, who made the motion? Motion by Trustee Jacobs, second by Trustee Thorstensen. Roll call, please.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Jacobs. 6 aye.
All right, motion carries. Item number 4, approval of Resolution 2018-09, establishing mitigation rates charged by the Gurnee Fire Department. Motion to approve. Trustee Ballmer, motion by Trustee Balmer, second by Trustee Jacobs. Roll call, please.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Jacobs. 6 aye.
All right, motion carries. That's the end of new business. I'll reopen the floor for public comment, if anyone would like to address the board. If not, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah. I know there's a few more holidays in December I'm missing. Everyone, staff, board, residents, have a warm, safe, wonderful, joyful holiday over the next couple of weeks. And our next meeting is January 7th, 2019. And it's going to be a big one. We have some fun stuff for that meeting. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion by Trustee Balmas, second by Trustee Garner. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.